Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. Friends, imagine what would be possible for you if you let go of your old limiting thoughts and beliefs and stories about yourself and the world, chose more useful ones, took inspired action, and experimented with more resourceful, joyful ways of being. The 52 questions in the Playground of Possibilities card deck by my friend Kay Ross will prompt you to do exactly that. And if you're a coach, a healer, or a therapist, the deck is also a great tool for you to use with your clients. Find out more at www.playgroundofpossibilities.com. Today I'm here with Annika Jensdotter. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
It's very exciting to have you here. Annika, I think we'll start by just telling me your story. Where are you from? How have you ended up in Hong Kong? And then a little bit about the birth of your daughter.
Okay. My name is Annika. I was born in California many years ago.
You don't have to say how many.
I'm 40 years old.
Oh my gosh, you look amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I have Scandinavian parents, so I'm a first-generation American. I grew up in Northern California in a little town called Palo Alto back then, which is a bit different today. Had a great childhood, growing up, quite simple and easygoing. I studied at Berkeley in my undergrad, and then I got my MBA from the University of San Diego. I studied abroad in Greece.
Oh, how great.
When I got my MBA, I studied abroad in Greece, and that's where I met my husband. My apartment was broken into and I was robbed. I think I had been living there for maybe 10 days. I didn't know anyone. And I had met this couple on a bus. I had one phone number and I called them and didn't know what to do. And I ended up moving in with them. And that was my husband's manager.
Oh.
So it's interesting how things happen. Yeah, I lived in Greece, ended up meeting Nico, ended up moving back there, working there for 5 years. I lived there for a total of 5 years. And we got pregnant with my first daughter there, Electra. And that's when we decided to come to Hong Kong.
Oh, okay. So you came here for work?
For my husband's work, yes.
Right. Okay, great. You have 2 children and one of them's got DS mosaic. Can you explain to me what that is?
Electra is 5.5.
It's your first daughter?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I had the birth in California. When she was born, well, we had this miraculous birth because we were about to go in for an emergency C-section. Literally had, scrubs on, waiting to give me the full epidural so I would be numb. Chain of events, being able to actually have a typical delivery. It's just the most amazing moment in my life when she was born, and spent the night with her. And the next morning, the pediatrician came in, who I didn't know. He was yanking on her arms and legs. And I'm thinking gosh, he's being really rough with her. What is he doing? And I overheard him tell the nurse, oh, I don't think she has Down syndrome. And it was like in one moment, the room was full of people, some of whom I didn't know. My husband's leaving for Greece in 2 hours. She came 2 weeks late and he came 2 weeks early. So he was away from work for a month, stressed out. His plane is literally he's leaving in 2 hours. I overhear this. And in one moment, it's almost like you feel like this is not my life.
Did you have any inkling about Down syndrome or anything else after she was born, or were you unaware?
By that time, she was, 12 hours old.
Yeah.
So, when she was born, I didn't see anything.
Right.
Now looking at pictures, I can see her eyes.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but at the time, you just
know.
Totally didn't see it.
Yeah.
He came over to me and he said, we suspect that your daughter has Down syndrome, but I don't think she does. I'm almost certain she doesn't. If she does, she's going to have mosaic Down syndrome. And I had never heard that before. In my 20s, I volunteered with adults with Down syndrome, so I'd always feel completely connected to people of different abilities and special needs. My sister's adopted from Guatemala. I grew up with her being in special education.
Yeah, so it's a part of your life.
It was a typical thing. But I never thought when I was pregnant, it never even occurred to me, it never passed my mind that I would have a child with Down syndrome. And I kind of looked at him and I thought, no, she's not. She's not going to have that. And he left, and she didn't have any of the typical markings. With Down syndrome, they have creases in their palms and on their feet.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They have, there's certain characteristics, lower muscle tone.
Oh, that's why he was shaking the arms and legs around. Okay.
And then it all made sense. I basically went home with her, and for the next 30 days, one day I would look at her and say, oh my gosh, she has it. And the next day, waiting for the phone to ring, right? And the next day I would think, absolutely not. Not allowing myself to get too close, not telling anyone, even my brother, my sister, my mother knew because she was there. I couldn't tell anyone because I didn't want anyone to talk about it. I didn't want it to be true. And, and when the doctor called and said, the results are in, he called me like 6 times in one day. I'm like, oh no, and I didn't want to talk to him on the phone. So I went down to his office and I walked in and he looks at me and he goes, I'm so sorry. I cannot tell you how many times I heard that. I'm so sorry. People were this pitying look. I understand that people were sad for me because they don't understand. And it's a dream that you lose. You think you're going to have a child that's going to become the president, or if they want to have that opportunity. And then you have something different come and you don't really know. It's the unknown. You don't know what that means. And having people constantly say, I'm sorry, means something's wrong.
How did that feel to have people saying, I'm so sorry, when you were probably so in love with your new baby?
Well, I was in love with her, but I have to be completely honest with you. When I left the hospital and, you had to have the baby they put them in a car seat for legality. You have to have them in the car seat when you get wheeled out in a wheelchair. And I came out and, I was holding her and there were all these people waiting to greet their other loved ones who had just had babies. And I looked at them and they were all looking at me, looking at my face, happy for me. Here I am with a newborn. And I wanted to leave her there. I wanted to leave my daughter there. This wasn't the child that I was going to have. For me to even think that, but I comfort myself around that because I know that I was scared and I didn't understand. I'm happy I found out after, when I gave birth, that I didn't know when I was pregnant because I would have been so worried.
Oh, yeah, that would have been so stressful. Yeah. But how was it waiting for those weeks before you got the diagnosis where you were wondering and then not wondering?
It was awful.
I bet it was really terrible.
And, I have to be honest with you, even when I found out, I still didn't tell anyone because I hadn't said it for the first 30 days or the first month. So I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know what to say. And in all honesty, I felt really guilty. And I felt like I did this to you. I broke you. This happened because I didn't do something right or I did something wrong, or it wasn't any sort of religious, God's getting back at you for something. It was more like I broke you, like my body broke you.
Yeah.
And took away.
I think that's very normal for people who give birth where things aren't as they would expect, that they often blame themselves. I think that's very, very normal. Even women who have a different kind of birth than they expect. If they wanted to have a vaginal birth, but they end up having a Caesar, they blame themselves for that. So there's lots of ways that we can blame ourselves for things not going as we or as society expects.
Oh, you should have seen my birth plan. And when I came in with that birth plan, it was laminated. I was just so excited. I was going to be a new mom. And the nurse looked at me and said, everyone that comes in with a birth plan like that ends up getting a C-section. And I kind of looked at her and giggled a little bit, but I get it. I get what she means today. I know why she said that. So,
how did you process the news after you got it?
My husband received a job offer right about the time when we got her diagnosis. So one of the reasons why he accepted the work was so I could stay home with her here. His salary was enough that it would be able to support our whole family. and I would be able to take her to therapy and do whatever I needed to do to support her. I just didn't feel comfortable having someone else at that time raise my daughter and do all these things that I just felt, for me, that I felt like that was my responsibility. She was born. I came to Hong Kong about 4 months later. Up until that point, I hadn't really talked to anyone about it. I hadn't got any support. I just was a new mom with all my hormones flying around, not sleeping a lot, worried about not having enough breast milk, and thinking that my breast milk was going to somehow cure her. That was going to be like, everyone talks about, oh, it's liquid gold. And I said, that is going to help her, because Electra's mosaic, which I know that you had asked.
I haven't asked you yet, but what is Down syndrome mosaic? What does that mean?
So there's 3 types of Down syndrome. There's trisomy 21, which is the most common. That's when you think of someone with Down syndrome, most of the time it's someone that has trisomy 21. It means 100% of their 21st chromosome has an extra chromosome. There's also translocation, which means I believe it means a chromosome breaks off and attaches to another chromosome. It's somewhat of the same thing. And that accounts for 4%. And then mosaic Down syndrome is 1%. So it's very rare. What it basically means is that Electra, she doesn't have 100% of her chromosomes affected. What the geneticist told us is that 52% of whatever of the blood sample that we had showed that she had Down syndrome in those 52% of her chromosomes. So the other 48% are typical. But we don't know if that was in the skin. We don't know if that was in the brain. We don't know where it came from. So if it's in the brain or if it's in the skin, it's a different situation in regards to how she's going to develop cognitively. But what the geneticist told us is that typically for people that have mosaic Down syndrome, they have a very good chance at leading 100% independent life because they can fall on the spectrum also of a typical child because not all of their chromosomes are affected. But we don't know. It varies from person to person.
You just have to wait and see how she develops as she grows
That's what she said.
to learn where her strengths and areas that she may struggle in are.
Do you know that every developmental milestone was so important to us?
I bet.
This is why I developed a horrible anxiety disorder when she was 18 months because everything was.
When is she crawling? When is she sitting?
Is she going to make it? And she made every milestone in the typical frame. But sometimes it would be like the last day.
Do you wish you didn't fixate so much on those milestones and cause yourself that anxiety?
Because I didn't project that onto her, but I
yourself.
Could, and a lot of new moms can resonate with that, whether they have a typical child or not. You're going to be worried about something, or when they're older and they're making friends and getting fights. And
I think, again, with your first, it's much harder than your second child. Maybe if you'd had them the other way around, you may have been not so stressed. Perhaps. It's hard to know. You can't know. But, a lot of times, many mums are more relaxed with their second child, regardless of what the situation is.
They hand them to a stranger, with dirty hands.
Yeah. They're not keeping them off the floor all the time.
Yeah.
How was your husband with the diagnosis?
So I called him on the phone because he had gone home to get his suitcase. And I said, you need to come back to the hospital. He drives back and he's like, what? Tell me. And I said, you need to be here. He came back. He had no idea what Down syndrome was because in Greece, there are no people with Down syndrome. I never saw one person with Down syndrome, and I'm always aware of people with, different needs. I gravitate to these beautiful people. I was very surprised to know that he didn't even know what that was. So he got on the plane. Before he got on the plane, he did research. So he's worried. My husband, he's a thinker. He's a good Greek. He likes to really ponder things in his mind. So he does a lot of research, and then he has to get on a plane and sit on a plane for how many hours and just sit with himself. And I think he was terrified. Just not having any experience and not knowing what this means, and also not being there. We were apart then for the next 4 months, almost 5 months.
That must have been hard for you both.
Yeah, it was.
Do you feel that you coped better with the diagnosis because of your experience with Down syndrome people in the past and just your understanding of special needs?
Yes and no. I think I did in a way. I think that came later. I think at first, no. Because I knew what that meant. I knew that meant that my daughter might possibly not have as much freedom as I want her to have. But you know what it is? At the end of the day, it comes down to what values you have as a person and what values you have as a family. And I feel that, if our values as a family are to have love and a simple life and free thinkers and independent thinkers and just the joy of being alive, we hit the jackpot. If our values as a family are for my daughter to go to the best university and to have be a CEO or by the time you're 30, and that's great too. For our family, I can see that our family, we're very simple people, and my husband has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met, and it fits. This life fits for us. I can see that.
Well, isn't that lovely? That's amazing. How old is Electra now?
She's 5.5.
How has she developed over the 5.5 years? Have you had surprises? Have there been setbacks, challenges, joys? All of that, I'm sure, with any child. But what's it been like with Electra?
Electra learns quickly and then she'll regress. So now that she's 5.5, I know her pattern. I don't worry as much anymore, but she goes to an early intervention center here in Hong Kong. I homeschool her as well because the education system here is not inclusive. And I will say that with capital letters. The advocacy I've had to do here has been heart-wrenching, and it's good. I'm growing up a lot.
I'm sure it's really frustrating, but hopefully you're getting somewhere. Are you getting...
Well, I'm homeschooling her, but I can tell you she's doing 10 times better than when she was just in a preschool before. But she's more of a Montessori kid. But when you're giving some sort of direction to a group, you'll lose her if there's 30 people in a class. So at home...
that's probably part of the problem in Hong Kong education. The classes are pretty much all very big, aren't they?
Are they? Yeah, from what I've been told, they are.
I think so.
At the end of the day, I just want her to have the same opportunities, and whether we choose to take them or not, it's just so different in the States in regards to inclusive education. And not having kids of any sort of special need in the classroom isn't a true representation of what society is today.
Absolutely. But I'm surprised you can't find that in primary in Hong Kong, because we certainly have it in secondary. We have many, many students in our school with special needs.
Special needs is on the rise.
We have an individual learning centre for students with special needs. And we have lots of them, ranging from, we've had Down syndrome children, we have students with Asperger's and autism and global learning difficulties, all of that. So I'm surprised that you can't find it for primary school. I understand maybe it's not available for kindergarten.
There are a couple of schools that we did find, but because of this debenture, which there are some other...
expensive, and also places as well. I think it's very hard to get places in these schools. Yeah, so there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers.
How was telling your family and friends when it finally came around to that? Was that easier for you because you'd taken all of this time to adjust and get used to the situation? Or was it more difficult?
I'll tell you what, when I moved to Hong Kong and I got one of these angel baby carriers, where you put your kid in, you sit there, I didn't want to have her facing out because I didn't want anyone to look at us. I didn't want anyone to see that she was different. I didn't want to catch people like double looking at her, giving her a double take. I didn't want to risk that. And I saw this woman walking around, and she was of Asian descent, and she was walking around with her stroller, and her child had Down syndrome. You could see he was maybe 3 years old. And I would see her everywhere. And I lived in Hung Hom and would take the ferry over every day because I attend meetings here and do other things in Central for Electra. How am I going to see in a city with millions of people? Am I going to see this woman everywhere? I swear she was there for me. And she somehow gave me, it was some sort of virtual hug. I don't know. I remember meeting with my friend Kookie one day. She was the first person that I ever sat and had lunch with. And she brought her son who has Down syndrome. And she looked at me and said, "It's going to be okay." There was always something about her that I very much admired. And she said, "The parts of me that you admire came because of my son." And that's when I knew that's it. And the people now in my life that have these children, and you see that these children are raising us, and it's just incredible.
That's wonderful. That's so nice. That's so lovely. I love that. Did that give you a different perspective on raising a special needs child? Like, did you then approach it in a different way? Or does that come over time?
I just believe after I left that lunch with her, I just felt, I didn't feel like I needed to hide Electra as much. I would have her sitting out or, it's just kind of like you just don't feel alone. And even though I had met some people online, when you have someone that is close in the city to you, and I don't know what it was, it did make things easier for me. That was the first start for me letting go of the guilt and the shame and walking into and opening up to this path that was given to me.
And having more of a sense of belonging, finding your tribe in a way.
Totally.
Yeah, we all need to feel like we belong and can connect to others.
Thing.
It really is. Yeah. What are some of the challenges that you face of a mother with a child with Down syndrome mosaic?
Isolation would be the first one. You can be in a room full of people, but you still feel like you're alone because you're on this other path. And you feel like, these other moms just don't get it, or you're jealous. I remember after I gave birth, every pregnant woman or newborn that I saw or birth announcement, I was so envious of their experience. Like, that must feel so nice to not worry. How nice just to be with your baby. And I remember I was on the swings one day with Electra, and there was a woman there, and I told her, about my birth story. And she said, oh, yeah, I have the same thing because I didn't love my son when he was born. And I get that she was trying to connect with me, and that must be really difficult. I can imagine not, feeling connected to your newborn baby must be horrible. It's not the same as finding out that your child has a syndrome that's going to be with them for the rest of their life. So you kind of feel like, you feel alone, and you also feel excluded a lot. I believe Electra there were a lot of things that she wasn't invited to. And then I feel like people would invite her because they felt they wanted to include her. So I think other people might have felt uncomfortable. They didn't really know how to handle that either. But overall, I would say the most difficult thing, and lately has to do with advocacy work that I have done for her, mainly with her education. I don't have to worry about the medical stuff here because Hong Kong has been great that way. We got into the government program here, and they take such good care of her. So I'm very grateful to Hong Kong for that. And I'm actually grateful that things have worked out the way they have with the advocacy. First of all, it's given me a voice because I'm a very strong woman. I'm Aries, I'm very fiery. My husband will tell you, I'm very, can be outspoken. But when it comes to standing up for my daughter, it's just been so difficult for me. I don't have any experience doing that. And there's just so much emotion involved, and trying not to be emotional about it and to channel that. I haven't quite figured that out yet. However, I'll get there. I have time.
You do have time. And I think that sometimes a few steps forwards and a few steps backwards, and sometimes even making a small difference can be so rewarding. If you can just get through to some people and make some changes and raise awareness, then that's so positive, and hopefully that will grow. And maybe you'll connect through the group that you're creating as well, which we'll talk about later, so that you may have more power in numbers, which will be really nice. But we'll come to that in a minute. But first of all, I just wanted to ask you, you've sort of touched on this, but did you have any dreams for your child when you were pregnant that you had to let go of as you discovered that she had Down syndrome mosaic? Or were you more sort of focused on the pregnancy and not so much focused on the future before you had her?
Well, I had the best pregnancy ever. I loved being pregnant. I felt so beautiful and connected and sexy and amazing, huh?
That's great.
I just had such a wonderful pregnancy. And I went back to California, and I was with my mother for the final 3 months. My husband and I got married when I was 6 months pregnant. A little taboo, but
I know, we like that. We're new age. We're all new age here.
We had a wedding then, and then we took our honeymoon in Sedona, which was very nice. And it was, we just had to get in a car because I'm from Palm Springs, California. Well, that's home now. My mom's there. And so I didn't go there. I didn't think about what life was going to be like. I think a lot of women in their first pregnancy, you just don't know, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
The saying like expectations lead to resentments. And so if you have an expectation of something, most likely things you'll fall short of them to some degree. I didn't have an expectation, but I didn't think that I was going to receive a diagnosis like that. It wasn't even in my field of sight.
How did that affect you emotionally? Like, were you able to maintain your mental health and your well-being through that, or did it make it more of a struggle for you than it perhaps normally would for a new mum, do you think? I guess you got nothing to compare it to, so it's hard to know.
Well, there's studies have shown that moms of special needs children have stress levels of combat soldiers. And I think that goes for all special needs, some children with a lot of needs. I get what that means. I think it's just all of the responsibility and am I doing enough? Am I doing too much?
And researching and looking into options and possibilities and ways to help
everyone has an
and all of that.
opinion.
Yeah. How's that? Is that difficult? Do you want people to leave you alone?
Well, I went searching for it. That's the problem, which led up to this daily panic attacks and, full-blown anxiety disorder. My husband and I talked about wanting to have a second child. And I said, I'm not going to have a second child until I make sure that I'm okay. I still had this residual that something is wrong with me.
I think that's normal, that you would have that fear, even though you love your firstborn and you wouldn't necessarily change anything. To go through that all again must create some sort of fear.
Oh, yeah. It was there. It was percolating there, just
I'm
bubbling.
Sure. Did you get sort of doctor's
that's
confirmation?
A problem. Well, I found out that I had thyroid issues, which is quite common after you have a child, actually. And I know thyroid issues are quite common for women, especially in general today. My thyroid was okay. It wasn't bad, but there was that. And that kind of led me down. And then I found out I had Hashimoto's. So it led me down that path. And I was all scared I had an autoimmune disease. I went to medical doctors, but I also went to naturopath. I went to a kinesiologist. I went to chiropractor. I was seeing my TCM doctor. I was going to all these people. And everyone was telling me to do something different. Everyone was telling me not to eat this or be sure you eat that. Don't do this. And it started to contradict so much that every time I walked in the kitchen, I would panic because I didn't know what to eat. I didn't know what to do because I hadn't gotten the help that I needed and had someone to talk to about all the thoughts that were swirling around in my head. It just became something too big for me.
Must have been so overwhelming.
It was overwhelming, yeah.
Yeah. You didn't have any specific counselling for your anxiety that you were feeling related to your situation?
No, I got that after.
I know, and we all do that, don't we? This is something that I hope people who are listening will get out of this, is that if you are struggling, if it is feeling overwhelming, there's no shame in that. It's so wise to seek psychological help. And seeing a counsellor or a therapist or something like that can be such a useful thing. And don't dilly-dally, get on it.
I think that's the thing, is that I had been in therapy for other things because I have quite a colorful past.
As we all do.
Anyway, I've had different counselors and therapists. I've always loved having that. I feel like it's a gift to be able to do something like that. Maybe it was just another specialist, another person I was going to go and
Look,
see.
you would have been so busy anyway that to find the time to do it must have been so difficult. And you're tired on hormonal and having to deal with the diagnosis and your expectations changing, all of that.
Yeah.
It's another thing that perhaps you didn't even think of. And sometimes we don't really know how much we're struggling until we look back with hindsight as well.
Looking back, there were red flags everywhere. And I'll bring them up with my husband and he'll say, oh yeah, he's so kind. He lets me have my own experience and he holds a safe place for me. He'll intersect if he needs to. If he thinks that I'm in harm or.
That's really nice. Can you share some of the red flags that were there? Are you open to sharing them?
Yeah, of course. Well, for me, I clearly had OCD issues, which ended up being diagnosed with when I ended up getting help. I was pumping breast milk 8 times a day plus breastfeeding for 30 minutes each time. And I would get up 3 times a night, every night. And I did that for 3 years.
You must have been exhausted just from that.
The sheer thought that if I didn't do that, that was my job.
You felt that you were inadequate if you weren't meeting all of those deadlines.
There was that. And it was also somehow going to help Electra because she had special needs. There was an extra.
Yeah, because as pregnant mothers, we hear about all the antibodies that are in the colostrum and how good the breast milk is for the baby's development.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense, that way of thinking, doesn't it?
I just latched onto that. For some reason, that was something that I latched onto that and I said, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it well. So I was doing that. So I wasn't sleeping right. And because I was so worried about my health and feeling better, I got very, very thin, extremely thin, like too thin. I was eating 6 different foods. The diagnosis for that is orthorexia, which is similar to anorexia. It's very common in Los Angeles, which is where I'm from. And I used to work in the entertainment industry. So
yes, many people have orthorexia undiagnosed.
it's like,
for our listeners out there, orthorexia is where you're eating basically just salad.
clean foods.
Yes, very clean foods, and you're not getting the 5 food groups, and you're just pretty much eating vegetables.
You set whatever guidelines you need to have the food be safe, but usually it's organic, clean, implying that what other people are eating is dirty.
Mm.
But I was listening to a lot of the advice that I had been given by all these trusted practitioners. And after crossing off more and more foods, there wasn't a lot left. I just became thin, tired, like the wind got taken out of my body.
Were you diagnosed with orthorexia?
I wasn't diagnosed.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Yeah. You can recognize it
Yeah,
in
I
hindsight
go to
again.
a group now.
Yeah,
I go to a 12-step group. I'm actually doing step work on it. And it's quite clear. I've had food issues since I was a teenager.
There's a whole nother podcast
I
we
thought
can
they had
do.
solved themselves, right? Because
Well, things like that pop up under stress, don't they? When you're in sort of fight or flight mode, it's those kind of old behaviors that you hang on to that rear their ugly heads. And it's almost a way of gaining control over other aspects of your life that you feel like you're not in control of.
Tell me, I was not in control of what was going on. I was moving at light speed. And
so that's one area you could control when everything else was swirling around you.
Yeah. It's so nice today to eat what I like. And yeah, it's so nice.
It's great. It's good on you for getting there so quickly. If you think about it, your daughter's only 5 years old. You've come a long way, which is great.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about the group that you've created that's called Mum's Special 2. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that the right name?
Yes.
So tell me about this group and what was the purpose behind it?
My husband's Greek, so we celebrate every summer in Mykonos.
Oh,
yes,
so
I'm very
jealous.
lucky. When I lived in Greece, we never went to Mykonos because we were working, so
yeah,
we wouldn't get out there as often. Now that we've moved far away, we seem to go more. But we have Greek summer there every year. And this past summer, I was feeling particularly in need, as you had said earlier, of finding my tribe. And I started looking around and found some groups and just nothing really clicked. And so that saying, if you haven't found it, why don't you create it? So I said, maybe I'll just start a group on Instagram and just connect with some other women. It can be a small group. We can support each other and carry each other on this amazing journey. I remember I was laying in bed one night and I was thinking, what am I going to call this? I was thinking special needs. Oh, no, it's about the mom. This focus is going to be on the mother because we always focus on our kids, especially when you have a special needs kid. I mean, you really focus on them. And I thought, these moms, we really need compassionate, loving care. Compassion. I started going over names and I thought, well, mom's special too. That's it. Mom's special too. And started the next day and just started not even knowing where I'm going, just knowing that I wanted to create a space where women felt safe to share their story without judgment or an agenda or fixing or, and to add a compassionate element to it. Because I believe we are so quick to give compassion to friends, family, or children, but we don't give it to ourselves, even if we say we do. And I'm talking about the self-compassion in the moment self-compassion, not getting a massage, not doing your nails. That's great. Having a bath, telling yourself it's okay. And I could share some compassion tips.
Yeah, please do. That'd be great. Because what you're talking about is things like not feeling that shame and that guilt and that sense of failure or whatever it is. Everybody has their own journey and their own experience. Yours is not going to be typical to everybody else, but we need to be compassionate with ourselves. And it's about acceptance, isn't it, as well? But please share some compassion tips with me. How can we be more self-compassionate?
I just took a course, a self-compassion course, which was based on the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, who is a professor at the University of Austin, Texas. And she's amazing. Her story's amazing. And I'll tell you 2 of the ones that I use every day. The first one is, no matter what situation. So if you're listening right now and you're having a really hard day, it's just one of those days where you want to go home, you want the day to be over. If you just sit for a minute and allow yourself to come up with, we call it the silver lining. There's always something good that happens from every situation. No matter how dire it is, something, you can extract something positive from that. And if you can just find one thing and just latch onto that and just hold that in your palm and walk with that, for me, that really helps. It can help in any situation. And the second one would be, it's called soothing touch. And what I actually do is, yesterday I'm home with Electra. I'm homeschooling her, pulling my hair out. She's not listening. I'm tired. I have a baby. She's crying. She's teething, and it's not the day. And I yell at Electra when I shouldn't, totally unwarranted. And I think, God, Annika, stop. And I start to want to berate myself because I go down this path of feeling like I'm a mistake, these old tapes in my head that aren't true and that I am changing. I put my hand on my chest. For me, that's the area where I feel that I'm holding myself. Some people will hold their wrists. You can actually give yourself a little hug. It sounds silly, but if you actually do it, you put your hand on your heart, take a deep breath and feel like, just like I tell myself, I've got you. I've got you. And like giving yourself that hug, and then what I do is I connect with the larger humanity. They call it the common humanity. And so I'll say, I know this is hard right now. I'll call it out. This is hard right now. That's okay. There are a lot of people out there that feel the exact same way as I do right now. And I'm going to hold you through this. I'm going to give you compassion and care right now. And it just takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And the more I do that, actually, there's been scientific studies on this. You're able to handle life better when you practice this time and time again, because you start to change. You actually change the neural pathways in your brain. So I use those every day. And there's also the loving kindness for those of you that are familiar with the loving kindness meditation, which goes like, may I have peace? You just maybe have 4 phrases that you say to yourself and you breathe in and out and you repeat those. But what you do is you can make your very, very own. So I have 2 for me. May I feel peace in my heart? May I be a success? Those for me, if I'm in a challenging moment, I'll just put my hand on my heart and I'll just repeat those 2. I have a few others too. Over time, it just becomes automatic. Instead of going to that dark place, I go to a place of
That's beautiful.
light. So
yeah, they're really lovely tips. Thank you so much. I was so wanting to just put my hand on my chest while you were
it
talking.
makes a difference.
Yeah,
it really
yeah.
makes a difference.
It's that soothing, isn't it? And the first one you were talking about is really about gratitude and finding the things that you can be grateful in life. Gratitude is such a great mindfulness skill. That's not really the word I'm looking for. Gratitude is
I think it is a skill.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I guess it is a skill because you've got to learn how to be grateful. You've got to learn to stop and
How are we going to stop in today's world? We are so on the go.
Okay, great. So it is a skill. Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah. Thank you for those tips. How was your group then received? You start this Instagram page, Mum Special 2. Did you get other mothers of special needs children joining your group? And then what sort of things were shared?
Yeah. Over, what has it been now? 6 months? Yeah, it's been about 6 months, a little bit less. We have new people joining every day. It's still a small group. It's a bit under 1,000.
Gosh, oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I didn't expect you to say that many. I thought you were going to say 300 or something.
Yeah, no, and these women are amazing. And I give you an example to answer your question. Last night I was staying up so late. I was posting a story about a girl named Brittany and her beautiful son, Mateo. Just seeing this child and seeing this mom and hearing her wisdom and feeling like I get like I'm in her tribe, and hearing her strength and hearing her say like, I hope, the future, talking about what she hopes for the future in regards to inclusion and, saying like the world would be so boring if we were all the same. Yeah. Every time I see these kids and I see how hard they're working and how we celebrate all the little wins, they're big for us. And the prayers or the well wishes that we send to each other when children are not doing well. We had one girl who lost her baby, was born and was in the hospital. And I just felt so connected to this little girl. And then, her name was Ava. And then I see a picture of the husband holding her and she had died. I couldn't get back on the page for 3 or 4 days because I just felt like so sad for this woman. And I just feel so honored. I have no idea where this is going. I have hopes to have a podcast. I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah, you can. You can.
I bought a microphone.
I'll help you. Oh, good. Yeah. No, I think it'd be great to have a podcast, and there would be such a platform for it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should definitely do it. Yeah.
And I have a friend of mine who's a naturopathic doctor, Dr. Catherine Dale, and she has
she's been on my podcast.
Oh, she has.
Yeah, she's done an amazing episode. Oh, what was it called?
Luna Energy, about the moon.
Yeah, it was something about women's periods and
she's way
all
into
of that.
That is her thing.
It was called Pondering Periods. There you go. So go back and look at it.
Yeah.
Listen to it. It's really, really fantastic. And my listeners out there, go check it out. It's such a great podcast. I learned so much about the history of menstruation and how it's been viewed in time in society. It's absolutely fascinating.
Oh, I'll have to go and check that out.
Yeah, check it out. It's a great, great podcast.
And Dr. Kat, she's a wonderful soul. And we've worked together before in Hong Kong on some other projects. And she had said, have you thought about doing a charity for these special needs moms? She's very much into self-care. And I said, not really. And so we started talking about it. And she said, I'm willing to donate my services, because she's a naturopathic doctor and
brilliant
fertility specialist. And I feel like things will be moving forward.
There's a world of opportunity out there for you, and you're just starting off on this journey in many ways. And it's really exciting. And I think what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. And I can imagine your group, Mum Special 2, is just connecting women who feel that isolation that you were talking about, that feel that fear and that kind of disenfranchised feeling from not the lack of inclusivity in different areas in society. And I can imagine that you give each other so much support and you share the fun and the laughter and also the tears and the fears and building each other up. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So isn't that lovely?
Yeah, it's been a great experience and kind of, I guess, just something that I've been looking for. I think we all want to do something nice with our lives, and I like to have intention in my days.
It's about making a difference.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like I'm doing with this podcast by sharing people's stories. But the interesting thing that's come out of it that I didn't expect is I'm meeting amazing, inspirational people just like you that build me up, that make my life more enriched.
Yeah.
So I didn't even really expect that absolute bonus. I thought I was just sharing stories with the world and helping all these other people, but I'm helping myself at the same time. And I can imagine that's perhaps what this group does for you. It helps you as well as others.
Oh, bingo.
Yeah. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
How's your life changed since starting this group? Do you feel less isolated?
Oh, yes. Oh, completely. It's interesting, too, because it's online. It's not like I have people in front of me, but I shared about the 2 other women, how their stories had affected me just so deeply. And that happens every day. I do feel connected, and I feel even more in tune with myself and just grateful to be on this path.
Yeah.
Really grateful.
And I'm more than happy to help you get started with a podcast as well, if I can do anything. Yeah, for sure.
I might need some pointers.
And remind me, my friend Regina from #Impact Podcast, she's starting a new podcast about how to start a podcast.
I followed her.
Great.
And I did her short little course.
Oh, you did it. Fantastic. I recommended it to you, did I?
Yes, you did.
Oh, good.
I took you up on that. Thank you for that.
Great. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
she's great.
awesome. Yeah, she's wonderful. We're both featured in Hong Kong living together this month, side by side.
Wonderful.
Which is really nice. So what's your sort of future goal for this group? Would you just like to see it grow? Would you like to do sort of global charity events together? Or do you have any sort of future plans? Or are you just sort of seeing how it develops slowly at the moment and sort of maybe moving on to connecting through the podcast as well?
I believe the podcast will be the first project and the charity.
And they'll be your initial audience. These mums will be your initial audience, which is
I told
lovely.
them about it, and they were...
And you could interview them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've already asked a few.
Great. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so some of the hashtags that I've seen are like warrior moms or the lucky few, or I can't think of some of the other ones, but these women are very inspirational and they have a lot to share.
Yeah. We've talked about the challenges that you faced as a mum of a special needs child, but what are some of the joys?
Yeah, I would say that, 90% of my life, I feel so lucky. Like, man, I hit the jackpot. What did I do to deserve this love and this path? And then the 10% that's difficult, I think all of us can share that. Like, get me,
Yeah, parenthood is not a smooth
SOS.
ride for anyone.
It is not
No,
a smooth ride.
It's not. Even when you've got adult children like me.
I can imagine that, but I can imagine that being amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. Motherhood's the only thing we don't have any training for. You don't have to get a license. You're just absolutely winging it and trusting your instincts. But it's also, I think, our greatest achievement that we'll ever do in our lives.
When I go back to the fact that I'm staying at home, I'm raising my daughter, sometimes I can feel a little bit like I want to apologize or backpedal for saying, like, I'm not a corporate woman also, because in today's society, so many women, work, and whether they have to or they want to, it's great, For me, I choose to stay home, and I've always worked since I had, my first babysitting job at like 11. And so for me to stay home, I think it's the single best thing I could have done for Electra. And my husband, tells me that every once in a while. He'll say, she's doing so well right now. She's reading at like a 3rd grade level, and
that's fantastic.
She did some division today.
It is because you've put that time and effort into it.
All the stuff, all the blocks, the little things.
But you're finding your niche, and it doesn't have to be in the corporate world. You're creating this group. You're creating this family. You're going to be building on this. This is just the beginning.
But maybe that's my thing.
Yeah, and that is your thing.
Maybe my thing is going to be raising my daughter. What if that's my thing?
It can be your thing. And I think it's also important that I quickly point out as well that when I was saying about motherhood being the single greatest thing that we've ever done because we're mums, I'm not taking away from people who choose not to have children as well. That's their choice, and they'll have joys and success and wonder in their lives from other things. Do you know what I mean? I think that's important to get across. I don't want anyone who's not a parent listening thinking that we're judging those who don't have them. It's all a life choice, and everything is valid.
Well, there's also, we birth other things. Maybe you're birthing a project.
Yeah.
Or you have a dog. I mean, there's other ways, to use our motherly.
There's other ways to nurture.
Wisdom,
it can be in your work. There's so many ways. Yeah.
I agree.
Tell me a little bit about having 2 children and one special needs. Does the other sibling lose out on attention or time? Do you have to make space for that child, or does it all flow naturally? And I'm sure for you, it's different for others. But what's your story or your journey with having 2 children?
It's getting better. In the beginning, the first 3 months, our daughter is named Calypso. She's 1.5 years.
Awesome baby names, by the way.
Greek goddesses.
Oh my God, they're fantastic.
We had a theme
Electra
going.
and Calypso. When are you having Zeus?
Oh, I know. I was going to say, or Plato, or I like Atlas. In the beginning, the first 3 months, I gave birth in Greece. I had my second daughter in Greece. I did not spend any time with Calypso, with the baby, because Electra took it so hard. They have a 4-year gap. So she was quite aware that she was not the queen anymore. And at the same time, you could see she wanted to love this baby, but she was just so jealous. And we're still having a lot of problems with that today. It's gotten a lot better, but I am trying to find that balance. And, in the community, I can see that that's actually quite a tricky topic. One of my best friends in Hong Kong, her sister has Down syndrome, who's 45. They're adults. I have heard her story and how much pain she had, what she went through being a sibling of a child with Down syndrome, especially 45 years ago.
That's so cool that you've had that story, that you have that sort of perspective.
Oh, yeah, it's been amazing.
Further down the track.
Maybe her story was particular to her, but I believe that there are generalities that you can apply to a sibling relationship. So I'm vigilant about it. I mean, I'm aware of it. However, I try to treat Electra like she is a typical child, not trying to baby her and do things for her that I know that she can do. And I think like any mother, you want to have time with all of your kids, so when I'm driving her back and forth to her intervention program, I'll, bring the baby and I'll spend the 3 hours with her while she's in her intervention. So I find ways to have quality time with them on their own, because when they're together, there is so much screaming and crying and then laughing.
But you're torn in 2 directions. Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a lot having young kids.
It is. I only had one, and I think having 2 close together would be difficult.
There are moments.
Yeah.
But then when you see them hug each other and kiss each other, and I think,
oh, that's beautiful.
yeah.
What are your hopes for the future for yourself and for your daughter?
I believe maybe like most other people, I'd like for my family to be happy, healthy. I want us to be healthy, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, happy, and to lead simple lives. I want for my daughter, I want her to have independence. I want her to be a free thinker. I want her to decide things for herself. If she wants to fall in love or if she doesn't, I want her to do that. I want her to create a life that she loves. And I would love for her to become, I'm teaching her about entrepreneurship. That's what I studied, and I have some experience in that area. And kind of saddling her with that information so she can own her own business if she wants to, but kind of planting those seeds for her. And I want her to be included as much as she wants to be included, to have opportunities that other people have. And for her to have peace in her heart. I think that would be wonderful.
That's beautiful. And you know what? That's what every mother wants for their child. All of what you said, you've really just summed it up beautifully. I couldn't have done it better.
Oh, I'm sure you could have.
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for meeting with me today, Annika. And if people want to follow you on Instagram or any other social media platforms, how can they find you?
Come find me. I would love to hear if you listen to the podcast. And if you want to join my Instagram page, it's at Mom Special 2, just spelled Mom Special and TOO. Or my own page is Mama on Fire.
Mama on Fire. How do you spell mama?
I spell mama with 2 M's, so
yeah,
I
but
spell it the
O or
Swedish
an
way.
A?
Oh, MAMMA.
Right,
Mama on
okay.
Fire.
Mums are special too is MOM, the American way.
MOMS.
Yeah.
Yes,
because
okay,
as
yeah.
an Australian, we're MUM.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. For my listeners out there, if you've really enjoyed this podcast or you know somebody who'd love to hear Annika's story and hear more about her beautiful daughter, then please share it with them. Please go to iTunes to rate and review us. I have a Patreon page called Hong Kong Confidential, and for as little as $1 a day, people can support this podcast. And you can go and hear the answers to 4 secret questions that Annika's going to answer that aren't going to be on this podcast, but they're going to be on my Patreon page. So we're going to say goodbye to you now. And for my lovely patrons who support my page, then please go over and check out Annika's questions on Patreon, Hong Kong Confidential. Thank you so much for being here today, Annika. It's just been absolutely heartwarming and beautiful. I've loved talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everyone for listening.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.